Welcome to another extended review. Last time I took a look at the episode Cover Up, and this time we'll be taking an in-depth look at the episode Moral Decay, which placed number 2 on my top 12 worst episodes list. Now, I placed Cover Up above this episode because in that episode, Buttercup did nothing to deserve her torment. I hate that episode only slightly more than this one. And just like Cover Up, this episode gets worse and worse the more that you think about it. First, let's talk about Buttercup's character derailment. Buttercup knocked out people's teeth for money, which not only sounds forced, but also makes no sense. First of all, how is Buttercup getting this money? This doesn't make any sense whether you believe in the Tooth Fairy or not. If you do believe in the Tooth Fairy only gives you money for your own teeth. I'm pretty sure that a magical creature like the Tooth Fairy would be able to tell somehow whether they're your own teeth or not. And if you don't believe in the Tooth Fairy and think it's the parents that give the kids money, then it's the professor who's giving Buttercup all this money. You'd think he'd be suspicious where she's getting all these teeth and would question her accordingly. But we'll come back to that later. So that's the first thing. Second, I really don't know why the writers had Buttercup do this. She's a hero. Why would she go around beating up the townspeople just to get some money? That sounds like something a villain would do. Maybe if the writers had a villain like Mojo Jojo stealing people's teeth, the episode would have been more tolerable. Heck, it might have even been good. It would actually have been funny to see Mojo believing in the Tooth Fairy and waking up gleefully to see money under his pillow. Then the Powerpuff Girls would discover what he's up to and get revenge for him knocking out people's teeth. Then these lines might not have been so infuriating.
Sorry, Buttercup. You know what they say? An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth.
It would have felt like an ordinary Powerpuff Girls episode, which is not a bad thing. And it would have, actually made sense. I'm astounded as to why the writers made the decision they did. I know this episode is pretty controversial among fans, and I often see arguments over whether or not Buttercup deserved her punishment. For me, though, it's not a question of did Buttercup deserve her punishment, so much as would she have done it in the first place. Speaking of that, it was extremely uncomfortable to watch Buttercup beating up the townspeople, the villains, and especially Bubbles for their teeth. First, there's the obvious reason, that she was beating them up. But then there's also the fact that it felt out of character for her. I know that Buttercup tends to be more aggressive than her sisters, but she has never been shown to beat people up for no reason, or for stupid reasons. Okay, I'll admit she can go a bit overboard sometimes, like in the training simulator in Bubble Vicious, or when she yelled at the Amoeba Boys in Gesundheit.
Oh, you guys shut up! You three are the lousiest, most pathetic criminals ever to walk the street! You stink! We don't ever want to see you again! Get out of town! Don't ever come back! Get out! Get out! Get out! Buttercup! Well, they made me mad.
But she would never go so far as to beat people up for teeth. She and her sisters are superheroes. And as a superhero, she has an intuitive sense of justice, which I don't believe would allow her to perform such actions as were displayed in this episode. And I should probably mention here that Buttercup isn't the only one out of character in this episode. Blossom and Bubbles were extremely vindictive towards Buttercup, gleefully watching their sister get a severe beating. Had it been just a random villain getting the beating for knocking out people's teeth, it wouldn't have been as bad, as it would have been all the sisters watching together. It was just so awkward and unpleasant to see Blossom and Bubbles react so coolly and so happily to their sister's injuries. And remember this line?
You could make a lot of money that way. Lots and lots of money. Lots and lots of money.
Almost sounds as if Blossom and Bubbles were plotting the same thing as Buttercup. But we couldn't have that, now could we? And I said before that it sounds like they were egging her on, but I find it hard to believe that Buttercup would want to do that just from hearing them talk about it. But what really bothered me was the professor. There are two possibilities. Either he didn't know what Buttercup was doing, or he did and played along with it until the very end. Honestly, I'm not sure which is worse. On the one hand, you have Professor being totally unaware of his daughter's deeds, which doesn't seem entirely plausible because he is the most involved person in his children's lives. On the other hand, you could have Professor completely aware that Buttercup is getting this money. In that case, there are two more possibilities. The first possibility is that the Tooth Fairy is giving her the money, like I said before. In that case, if Professor knows this, he's doing nothing to stop it or even slow it down. He's just secretly watching his daughter get money from beating people up and knocking their teeth out. The second possibility is that Professor is giving Buttercup the money. In that case, he is actively fueling her desire for more money, and in doing so, actively setting her up to be beaten up. Either way, he is participating in his daughter's crimes and in her eventual downfall. This makes the ending all the worse. He's sitting there, dead silent, looking at a magazine while his other two daughters smirk at the injured Buttercup. It deeply disturbs me that he doesn't show any concern whatsoever that Blossom and Bubbles have just stood by and let Buttercup get beaten up mercilessly. I'm seriously starting to wonder if Buttercup has a dysfunctional relationship with her family. I mean, think about it. Professor makes her leave the house for refusing to take a bath in Down and Dirty, something he never would have done to Blossom or Bubbles. Blossom uses her heat vision on her in Octa-Evil for what she calls insubordination. And Bubbles is constantly calling Buttercup stupid, like in Stray Bullet and Not So Awesome Blossom. Okay, maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but you get my point. He finally looks at her, and when she smiles a nervous, broken-toothed smile at him, he doesn't even bat an eyelash at Buttercup's injuries.
Well, Buttercup, I can't say I'm proud of you.
When have you ever been proud of her? And that's a legitimate question, by the way. When has the professor ever been proud of Buttercup in a way that didn't somehow involve the other girls? If you can give me an example, I'll gladly listen, because I can't think of a single episode where this happened. If you've seen my extended review of Cover-Up, you'll remember I talked about those pep talks Professor gave Bubbles in Boogie Frights and Blossom in the main event. We don't get anything like that with Buttercup. At all. No encouragement, no kind words, nothing. Not even a simple, I love you. Would it have killed him to just say that one time? It's not that hard, I promise.
I've always been there, and I always will. Come here. I love you, kid. Understand?
If someone as hardcore as Chips from Sons of Anarchy can do it, why can't you? Show some compassion for your children. Then there's the end screen. Remember that evil-looking face Blossom was making? Well, I noticed after making the review that Buttercup makes the exact same face earlier in the episode. When she does it, it's terrifying and wrong. When Blossom does it, no, it's still terrifying, but the episode expects me to find it justified. Don't you just love hypocrisy? I really don't understand all these double standards involving Buttercup. I know I sound partly biased because Buttercup is my favorite character, but I'd still be mad if this were done to another character. Maybe not as mad, admittedly, but still. Now let's talk about my biggest problem with the episode. The hatred. There is so much hatred in the episode that I can barely stand to watch it. I said in my top 12 video that everyone seemed to be against Buttercup in this episode. I can't believe that the writers would show so much contempt for one of their own characters. Actually, scratch that. For all their characters. Having your characters act so horrendously cruel is just so unpleasant to watch. It felt like Blossom and Bubbles hated their sister. It felt like the professor hated his daughter. And it felt like Townsville hated one of its heroes. That is absolutely heartbreaking. I said in my review that this episode didn't need to exist. Well, maybe it does, if only to serve as a warning to show that hatred can kill an episode, even an episode of an otherwise good show.